Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mage, the Hero Described podcast, vodcast, whatever it is now. We're looking at episode 22 of the podcast, episode 2 of the vodcast. And I am joined up, let me get side by side. There we go. Bring up the man, the myth, the legend, Eli Schwab from...
What's up?
Hey man, from the Devil in Detail podcast. Your whole thing doing the vodcast on that also inspired me that, hey, we got to take a look at what we're talking about while we're going through this.
Got it.
And, comics impresario, publisher at large. You got a lot of stuff going on with Cosmic Lion right now.
Oh my God, it never stops. It never stops. We got a Kickstarter going on right now for issue 2 of Ghost Agents, which I thought I had on the floor, but I actually don't. It's a spy-fi action comic anthology. Rocco Jerome writes it, and we got tons of amazing artists seeing his vision out. So go to Kickstarter and search Ghost Agents, and you can back us there. As well as Wizard #2, the comics magazine. It's a riff on Wizard magazines from the 90s. This issue 2, is 420 pages.
Wow, that's
and once
chunky.
I got there, I was like, we can't. Oh, it's a chunky boy. It's going to be amazing. You can use it as a doorstop once you're done reading it, it's a dual purpose. But it's going to be amazing. And that I think pre-orders are going to start for that around March 1st. It's huge. It features a ton of people. And just that's going to be amazing. More podcasts. Can I Flip It? Cosmic Lion Radio, perhaps, maybe my 10-year odyssey of podcasting continues there. Monthly, annually, who knows with that podcast, but Can I Flip It is also monthly, and then The Devil in Detail is weekly.
Man, you are busy cranking away. I'm waiting. I'm looking forward to that Ghost Agents 2. I missed the first round on the Kickstarter, but is it Ben Perkins, the Don Apprentice poster for
right.
that was just I couldn't resist. That's going to be up on the wall at some point as soon as that
Heck
comes
yeah.
through.
And you can get issue 1 through the issue 2 Kickstarter.
I'm getting it.
So
I'm getting it.
Perfect.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, awesome.
No, that's great. That's got about, today's recording this on the 19th of February. It's probably going to drop a little bit after, but there's still something like about 12 days left to back that. You guys got fully
till
back.
The 27th of February.
Yeah, you got fully back. Now you're in stretch goal territory.
Hell yeah. We got some awesome stuff planned. Some stickers, possibly some shirts, possibly we have these cool, like a riff on the G.I. Joe info cards that you used to get on the back of your blister packs on the back of your boards there. So that's going to be cool.
Very cool. You're going to get the +1 on the action figure. No action figure just yet, but at least you get what would have come on the back of it.
Yeah, we want those though. We want to work to figures, man.
Well, cool. All right. So we are here to discuss issue 2 of Mage, the Hero Discovered. Just a little bit of bookkeeping here, everybody. Over on Instagram. Boy, what is that even at this point? I think it's Hero Described. I'll have to look that up and double check it. So check us out over at Mage Hero Described on Instagram, and here over at YouTube. If you're checking us out through YouTube, just, give us those thumbs up, give us those likes, give us those comments if you're having a good time. Would love some 5-star ratings and reviews over on the podcast. If you're a past listener, if you listen through Hero Denied and you're joining us on the rest of this ride, on this reread, some love would be greatly appreciated because, as everybody says in this podcast business, it helps us. It really does.
Algorithm.
I'm sorry, what, man?
Algorithm.
We all bow down. We all bow down to the algorithm. Send it those signals. Let it know what you like, and then it'll throw up other stuff that you like. Well, cool. All right, so let's dive on in. Before we started recording here, we were talking about one of the things that with the reprints of Mage. And the way those had to come about, the original printing materials all lost in the bankruptcy of Kamiko, having to scan in, I think Ben might have even mentioned, or you mentioned on the last podcast, probably scanning in something like maybe the Starblaze editions that were done from those original prints. And so decisions and sacrifices had to be made in some of these reprints. And one of the things that got dropped out, and these are really great elements that you just lose in reprints. Typically you lose, the letter column. So there's a lot of fun there. But also what was lost was these great forewords by Matt. And I think they really show a great, they give insight into what's going on in his mind as a storyteller, as an artist, where the story's going. And they are, as Roy Batty says, all these moments will be lost in time like tears in rain. So, or something like that. Great, one of the great improv lines of all times that Rutger Hauer came up with on the fly. But what I was thinking we might do as just a way to kind of, share it with people who the reprints are the only way they've been able to experience these. We're just gonna, humor us, people. We're gonna read through the foreword of issue 1. I'm gonna read through that. Eli's gonna read through the foreword of issue 2, and then we will dive right on in.
Yeah.
So cool. I'm just gonna, you get the excitement. Hey, you get guys and gals watching this on YouTube. You're gonna have the excitement of watching somebody read to you.
Oh yeah. Be animated.
So what we've got here is also, I'm just gonna show here. So we've got that spread there of the foreword right inside the cover of chapter 1. Nice big chunky foreword from Matt there in chapter 1. Outrageous slings and arrows. So he says, so here we are starting everything off. Dear readers, the book you hold in your hands is the start of a series that has been brewing in me for quite some time in one form or another. It's a story that I've begun several times and shelved as many times. It has been reworked and rethought so many ways that at several times I believed that I would never see it evolve into anything remotely developed enough to publish. Even now, I don't feel that this is the only version of this story that I may tell. Some future time may see me again reworking this tale, as I feel it contains the most archetypal elements of heroic literature. And just considering everything that he was working this story, hitting all the points of the hero's journey, the monomyth, without any awareness of it, he's just tapped into that right from the very beginning. In understanding the philosophy of the hero, one must consider the unique mixture of glory, irony, excitement, fate, determination, and monumental sadness that has been evident in every tale of heroism from Gilgamesh to John F. Kennedy. It is a general prominence of any one or more of these qualities that determines the hero's exuberance or hesitation. But be he gung-ho, or be he the height of reluctance, the hero is ever driven into a state of action. Like it or not, he must act and act again. Like an incomplete verb, the hero remains ever unresolved. But this is one of the many concepts on which I've built Mage. Unlike the work I have done on Grendel, wherein good and evil are practically indistinguishable in the eternal cycle, herein there exists dark and light in a never-ending struggle for supremacy. This is not necessarily how I view things, but rather what I feel is the most apt vehicle for relating the tale of Kevin and the Mage. Heroism is a relative thing, as the hero of one people is the arch enemy of their rivals and vice versa. In addition, this story is in response to several of my observations of the comic industry in general. These I will save for future editorials, but suffice to say here that I hope Mage will entertain you at the least, and maybe even help you consider the hero that I feel must, all caps there, must reside in us all. So nice. Petty stuff. And what I love is, when you look at the trilogy, so, hey, this is a reread, so spoilers abound and things like that. Without getting into the details of why it's important, Gilgamesh is mentioned, bang, the first hero, the first superhero, one of the earliest evidences of the monomyth, bang, forward of issue 1, and we've got Gilgamesh being mentioned right away. So certain seeds, no matter what was planned for the trilogy as a whole, whatever was percolating, there were certain seeds that, much like he talks about at the beginning of this, that for the entire story had been percolating and just laying there dormant, waiting to just spring to life.
So great. I mean, it just shows too the power of that Matt had even as a youth, like the fervor he had, you know, because at this point he's what, in his 20s, that where he's writing this, just the power that he had. And I think it even continues in this one, if I may begin.
Go for it, man.
Dear readers, first, let me say thanks for the very favorable response we have received on Mage #1. We will begin printing your letters next issue. A common element in all responses has seemed to be in favor of the raw, experimental style that I use on Mage, and it is this I would like to comment on. Here we go. This paragraph killed me. In being an artist of any sort, one is akin to a big game hunter, for the artist stalks the public. He seeks to attack the public and to carry forth their acceptance as a trophy. And the artist's technique is how he arms himself. The more of himself he puts on the line, the more naked he stands before his prey, the more dangerous the hunt is to him. It's all too easy to learn the conventional techniques and methods that dominate whatever market the artist stalks. Executing the piece in the slick, publicly accepted style guarantees an all too easy kill and strips the hunt of all the thrill that it originally promised. The boardwalks and shopping malls are overflowing with artists that have let the public form their style instead of vice versa. The artist should instead seek to tame the public with the raw essence inside him. Art is man-made and should always appear thus. The evidence of a human hand at work is what makes a piece sparkle over the cold, mechanical realism that is so prevalent today. Mage is from within me, and I will always strive to present you with the raw, gut-level excitement that it evokes in me. When confronting the monstrous obstacle that the public presents, I will always choose to arm myself with the more challenging bow and arrow rather than the convenience of a high-powered rifle. As always, I look forward to hearing from more of you. Until next issue, always remember that magic is green. Damn, Matt. Woo!
Yeah.
So good.
What an amazing. So, as an artist, just curious, what are your thoughts about that? Because that's like just a mini manifesto in a way that he's put forward there.
I love that too. Like, especially looking at it again from hindsight and from an artist who, so for like 95% of his career, only pen and ink and markers and things like that. And it was just kind of now getting into like using an iPad and Procreate and stuff like that. It feels better to get that pen and ink, and it feels better to, and look, and as I was saying before, when we were talking about this, like when you look at the colors and the painting style and almost the markery look of the colors of this early Mage, I like it better. It has a more raw, it has a more earthy comic book bound feel than further colors. We were talking about, it feels like, it feels more like I'm looking at a piece of art rather than like the more higher res, the digital coloring that took later. And especially like, say, if you're reading this on Comixology, there's nothing wrong with that, despite what they might have done with their app and all that, another story. It just feels more like a piece of art. I was saying it's like watching Star Trek on VHS versus watching it now in HD. Before, you totally believed Brent Spiner he had the white makeup and all you saw was this plastic man. But now you see in the close-ups, it's HD. You see this is a human with white paint on his face. You see his makeup covering blemishes and stuff like that. It's just a different feel to look at this in the original artistic vision and color than it is to see it like digitally redone. There's some changes. And we always talk about this on the Grendel cast. It's like sometimes that original image and view, that's just what it is. I especially feel like that on the coloring of this original Mage.
Yeah, and I think there's, I think that when we went through this in the last episode, right, that really gave being able to see that issue 1 and looking at it side by side, which I'm going to continue doing with this as much as I can, really opened up my eyes. Ben's perspective really helped me take a look at the reissues and the coloring job that was done by Jeremy Cox with a completely new appreciation, right? So I'm not dogging on it at all. There's some great decisions. And look, this morning I mentioned to you I was looking at some of these pages side by side, prepping for this, for doing the recording this, and there were some things that I was like, yep, gosh, I really prefer how this is in the original. And others I was looking at and going, oh, okay, that's interesting because that really totally changes the focus of this panel. And maybe at some point, if Matt's kind enough to join for a future podcast revisit talking about this here, it'd be interesting to dig in deeper and find out, hey, what decisions, during that process of doing those reprints was driven by just sheer necessity from the materials that they had to work with and time, and not having the original printing materials and publication pieces to run with. And what part of it was, oh, you know what? It's been X amount of years since I've had a chance to look at this. Maybe I can, fix this, tweak this. I could have done this better while still honoring the spirit of it. So sure, it's a fine line that any artist has to walk.
And the artist's eye is so much different than our eye, because the artist sees all the mistakes and the artist sees the vision he had in his head, whereas we see it as this piece of art that we're looking at, So while I am like, oh my God, I love this puke green background here. It's so cool. Matt might be looking at it and be like, I've always hated that puke green background, and now it's my time to change it,
Right.
Kamiko touted, and we always talk about it, they had all those, was it 207 colors or whatever their number was. So it might have been easier to I don't know, to get lost and be like, oh, I've got all these colors to play with. And so sometimes when you have too many tools, you use too much. Whereas if you only had 6 to play with, you might be more succinct.
Another thing that I thought was interesting in that foreword is mentioning the artists who play to the public taste, thriving everywhere in public spaces, and he mentions it in malls. And this was the 80s, and I remember in the 80s a big thing, at least maybe I just became aware of it in the 80s in malls, but all of a sudden in the 80s and for quite some time afterwards, we saw the birth of the print of the art store, the mass-produced art store, where you could go in and there would be thousands of pieces of art ranging across all tastes, whether it was classical, impressionist, Renaissance, Nagel. I mean, the Nagel boom was happening during this time. And so the epitome of the commercialization of art, not to take away from any of the art that, that people love, but I'm not sure if that's driven by that, but I seem to remember, it struck me that it's very apt, that mention that this is art. Look, certain art was not going to be in that place. Like any other kind of business, you're going to be like going, oh, those pieces, this artist, this style, that genre doesn't move. Don't order more of them, and once we're out, they're never coming back again. So most of the pieces that you'd find in a place like that had probably already proven themselves over time, some over centuries. But by and large, chasing that public approval. And, definitely that was big in the malls.
Yeah. And that's something Matt's always been able to do is find his niche and just work it. He never does that thing that everyone expects him to do. He's only ever done one Marvel book, and now whether that's Marvel's choice or whether that's been Matt's choice to work on the characters that maybe he likes more, like Sandman Mystery Theater or the Demon. He's had these amazing runs, but on these like kind of smaller characters. But that's when you're doing a Hulk book, you have this line you have to run, or, I guess there's always people who can, carve out their own niche in those wide streets, but you still have to keep in a thing. But if you're doing the demon, or maybe you're doing Sandman Mystery Theater, you can kind of reimagine like they did with Sandman for sure.
Yeah, and that
or the Golden Age Sandman.
Not to get too deep into it, but you ran that great symposium interview with Jim Rugg talking about Hulk Grand Design, and sitting down and reading just decades worth of hundreds of
Insane.
issues and noticing the trends across the time, both in storytelling and art, that flowed through those. And that when you work on something like that, depending especially on the decade you worked for one of those big houses, it was like, nope, this is the way we tell the story.
Yeah,
keep it between
the
Hulk
lines. Wears a suit now, he's gray, and he's known as Joe Fix-It. So this is what you're writing right now, and you're like, oh gosh, this is not what I signed on for.
And this is the style that's hot right now in selling books in the industry, so
right,
lean into that. Don't yes. We don't want to.
The sides of his head are shaved, and it's just a 90s bowl cut on top.
Okay, so hey, let's anything else
get
you
into
want
the
to
book.
bring up before we get in? Let me
I'm all good.
Bring this up.
I have something to bring up on the cover. I did a deep dive on this little poster.
Hold on
Nina
a minute here.
Yeah,
I'm trying to center this one here, and it's not letting me.
I'm sure you can cut this out. 3 dots in the top right. If you click that and then do pin or spotlight for all.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
I can get a nose blow in here if we already got an edit point.
Okay, there we go. And hold on a second while I'll just beep cut that out. All right, so here we are. The cover, I just decided I'm going to take this issue out. I love you all so much. I'm willing to go ahead and put my my first printing Kamikos of Mage out there out there in the line of damage. I'm not a slap junkie, man. I mean, comics are meant to be read. But
meant to be read.
Let me see if I can block out some of the light here so that we can get I had to play with this earlier. They got fluorescence down here, and they're messing.
Now, one thing I did notice on this cover while you're working on that, right below Kevin's body there, we see a poster that says Nina Tower Theater, I would expect, Friday, October 1st. So I had to do a deep dive there, and I was like, who's Nina? Is that an actual artist? And it is. That's the artist, the 99 Red Balloons lady.
Oh, Nina Hagen.
Yeah, that's what I'm guessing. Man, I didn't even see Squaw up here. Who's Squaw?
Yeah. And
we know Matt's a big music fan.
And this really also, you get Kevin and Mirth on the cover in this kind of just abstract hero-centered kind of, floating out there, in nothing on issue 1. This really captures what this story is mixing together in the setting. We've got this, we've got this urban environment, right? Kevin just kind of casually leaning there, hanging out in an alleyway with the graffiti and the music posters on up. It's saying something about just the kind of environment you're in. And then just this flash of the extraordinary, the shadowed figure with all this magical green around it. So it really does cover this intrusion of the magical into this like gritty urban world.
Yeah, I love it. Like you said, like this, it's like literally a street level hero standing upon the street, and then this magical character like literally above it, floating above. Yeah.
Yeah. And that look also that Kevin's got there really just it's a little bit ambivalent. I mean, we use the word because it's used a lot for Kevin Matchstick, cynical, but it is kind of this very hard, appraising, look. This is not an accepting, thrilled to see somebody, look.
Yeah.
Not looking out at the audience, looking up at Mirth, and not necessarily thrilled, not necessarily unhappy either, but a little very ambivalent. Yeah,
it takes him a long time to like buy in. It really does. Even after he sees monsters and survives this first page incident here, he's just like still being hard-headed about it.
So we continue. We got a little bit of a recap here on the back. I'm going to just see it if I can read it off my screen here. Actually, you've got the issue right there in front of you, right? You
Sure.
want to read that little
Yeah.
recap on the back?
Death, last issue, thrusting themselves into the lonely life of Kevin Matchstick are the mysterious vagabond sorcerer Mirth, the evil Grackle Flints with their poisonous elbow spurs and a power that runs through Kevin's body and spawns from a struggle as old as time itself. Passing all this off to a dream, Kevin sets off to work, only to find himself trapped in a subway car with 3 Grackle Flints. In a desperate move, Kevin dives through the window directly into the path of another train. Ba-ba-ba.
And that's the recap on the inside. And then here on the back, we've got following his first brush with the confusing fervor of the eternal struggle, Kevin Matchstick once again finds the vagabond sorcerer Mirth and mysteriously intruding on his life. Despite all his fears and doubts, Kevin is the hero. The power with him is beyond his control and comprehension, but not beyond his heart. The heart that compels him to action to save the girl that knows him, but has never met him. So that's interesting. There's a lot being spilled here on the back about what's going to be going on. So we're setting up, a little bit of what's to come.
Exactly.
A lot of mystery.
Page 1 is basically the last page of the previous issue too. I don't know if it's exact, but it kind of picks you up right there. Yeah,
it picks up because literally he's freezing in midair in between the two. So we're kind of cinematically following the action here. And
yeah, it's great.
We take a look at this. There's some really cool choices that were made. We were talking about, again, depending on how much resolution they had and what was going on with coloring and storytelling and art in the time. I love some of the decisions that Matt made initially with this. And let's remember that he wasn't doing digital coloring. So there's different choices that are made, but those crackle lines throughout the crash,
It's interesting too, because I think it was maybe like they had just the color steps, so you do have the black on one layer and then you have the color underneath. So it's most likely that the crash, like the cracked glass look on the Kamiko was on the color layer. So if they're like not going to reproduce that color layer, they're either like, okay, are we going to redo this effect or are we going to just go with a gradient? And so I guess they're like, let's go with this gradient. Let's get a motion blur going.
Yep. Yeah, I think sometimes there's just sacrifices that have to be made.
Yeah.
Those great sound effects there. We see what I love on this original here in the light, and it works well in both, right? I mean, the colors in the reprint don't suffer for it, but we get kind of the run through of the yellow and the white for the shining bright light of the subway coming on, that great impact smash for the whoomp with the shadowy figure of Kevin hitting. Interesting.
There's some color, like lens flare there.
Yeah.
In the wide shot.
And some interesting color choices. I think it's neat where, Matt's using white for the white glare of the light in the original. We've got everything is washed in more of that yellow light. Kevin's face washed in yellow as opposed to being washed in bright white in the two different versions here.
Yeah.
And interesting keeping the color. There's a decision being made about the consistency of the color here, where the clackety clack of the train approaching in the original is in green, and we're sticking with those orangey colors that depict the light underneath in the reprint colors.
Yeah, interesting.
So Kevin's leapt out, being confronted with 3 of these strange beings. There's another thing I love here as well, just interesting choices. Originally,
really different.
Yeah, and originally Matt breaking out those thuddahs, right? So Kevin's there in the middle of the subway tracks. Train comes along. It's clackety clackety clack, thuddah, thuddah, thuddah as the train moves on through.
And over top of him.
The original, we just have. I think it's neat that, in the reprint we added in light coming from the windows of the subway.
Oh yeah.
And of course And the original, I'm torn about this. I mean, they both stand out, but I really kind of like the standout of those red photos against the green, where it's a little bit more subtle in the reprint there.
Yeah, I think it really comes off as showing a modernization of comic book coloring, like the green does seem more like 80s or seems more like early comics, whereas, with the purple and the red, it seems a little more modern. And I think that's partly why they did the recoloring, is to help modern readers, be able to accept it or feel like I'm reading a modern book versus I'm clearly reading something from the 80s, which is how I like it. But
yeah,
I like seeing the original choices.
Well, we talked about, of course, like we're all like baby ducklings imprinting on the first thing that we've run into on something.
True, it's true.
You get the same thing with bands as well. People are like, I've met enough people who are like, oh yeah, ever since Syd Barrett left Pink Floyd, I hate them. They're not the same band. It's like, okay, it's true.
I would tell them you're wrong. Well, they're not the same band. They're a better band.
Yes.
I'm kidding. Syd era is good too.
Two each.
I've got a bike. I can ride it if you like. Okay, yeah. This
studiously, I studiously or pointedly tried to like Syd Barrett, Pink Floyd, and it's good. Yeah. It's got a point. His solo stuff is interesting too, but I'll take the Roger Waters and post and Gilmore eras.
Yeah, they just got better and polished. And
so
Kevin like survived it, and he's like, he doesn't even know it at first. All he can think about is his cherry Cokes.
Yeah, I mean, he's still like, oh man, that was terrible, and coming to that realization. Wait a minute. My clothes are all tattered, but I'm okay. And we use that as a great, so, I mean, he goes into the subway thinking this was all a dream. And now he's got this other instance without this Mirth character around, that's repeated and physical proof, so to speak. I think we're still going to have a hard time bringing him in. These here, I mean, again, some different color choices. We go on over to the Styx Hotel and Casino, and on the opposite side of the chessboard, we've got the Umbra Sprite discussing with some of the Grackle Flints, what's that now that he's awakened, and I'm going to have to bring this closer here so I can see here.
They really got the digital lens flares and stuff working on the new coloring.
Yeah, definitely. But talking about how, hey, don't be sure that he's dead, and we start getting these hints to something more beyond just even being a hero, because the Umbra Sprite mentions he probably doesn't realize who he really is. So that's laying a little bit of a seed there also. Like, what do you mean who he really is? Okay, so he's been pulled into this eternal struggle, or he's being drafted, as it were, by Mirth, but who he really is? And also that the train probably barely phased him. So they're keeping an eye to see if he comes out. And Piet, one of the Grackle Flint, says, I still find that it's hard to believe that a subway train at full speed couldn't. And the Umbra Sprite says, I know, and at one time it would have done the job, but once he encountered the World Mage, the power awakened swiftly in him. Throughout all this, the Umbra Sprite's face, always pointedly in shadow, right? In shadow in that second and third panel. And then even when we get a chance to have light on his face, covered by a hand covering, shadowing the details of the face there, which is a neat touch.
Yeah. And here is where I was saying they got rid of that green background. They basically remove that green everywhere it occurs.
And I wonder if also, not just the color choices there's a lot of texture sometimes in the background. And I think it's just, as you said, when you're dealing with your different layer color separations, some of those things, and we're going to come up to a panel where it really shows, some of those things were just like, okay, are we really going to go through and reproduce that? Because we're going to have to add it all back in again. I think it's an interesting decision to make the room, as they're discussing in panel 3. You almost get this neat silhouette effect. It's just, it's a white background. You have the windows in this purpley gray. You have the sun, or whatever light is coming through the windows, reflected off the floor in that purpley gray in the original, and everybody's in shadows, right? The desk is in shadows, the grackle flints, the umbra sprite, and the room has been really brought to life in more of a typical, okay, we're looking at a room, right? The color outside, it looks like we've got this bluish color coming in through the windows. We've got like sunlight hitting a floor and the reflections. It's become more natural, I guess, more naturalistic.
Well, to me, it also kind of changes the layout because in the Kamiko, this is an open panel, what they call an open panel with no borders, which creates a different flow to the page. And with the new coloring, I feel like it closes the panel. So it turns this open panel, which kind of brings you in this like wide shot. It kind of closes it into like, this is the room, which is maybe something I don't necessarily agree with. However, maybe because they always do say like have one open panel per page or something like that, or per spread, it adds a certain flow, and they close it off in the new one. That's their prerogative, but
interesting choice. But so let's keep on going forward here. Let's see.
And I think we're also kind of getting a little bit more into the delineation of the grackle flints personally. There's Emile, there's Piet, and we're kind of learning a little bit more about maybe how some have different abilities and there's a hierarchy to their
right
five of them,
and different personalities, even and we'll see that some disagree. There's more dissension and disagreement among some of them than others, but they each have their own distinct personality, and can at times be sand in the Vaseline for the whole experience. So let's see here. We move on. The conversation continues, and the Umbra Sprite mentions they should have kept better track of Mirth's movements. Now, Matchstick, and here's a strong statement, Matchstick is now beyond any harm this world has to offer. And, we're going to await your brother's report. If he is alive, then we'll have to arrange for some harm that comes from beyond this realm. So we're hearing, there's a bit of a raising the stakes here while Kevin makes his way back out. Just some small artistic notes here. Nothing major here. Some color decisions and changes. Again, I think just dimensionalizing the subway as Kevin comes out, thinking to himself.
Yeah, for sure. And
now we have, whereas the subway station was empty, no people around at all when he got onto the train, and we had discussed that earlier. Was that just artistically easier? Has he, it's nice to play with concepts that come later in the series. Maybe he was slipping into in between realms a little bit here. But there's a woman here who sees this guy just come up along the tracks and just climb out of the subway tracks and fainting. So cute. And this is where he's thinking about, what is he going to say about work, calling into his boss.
What's he going to tell Cooch?
Yeah, Cooch, who I think I mentioned last time, I think is probably a call out to Bill Cucinato from Kamiko. Some neat choices here in the reprint. We see the smoke kind of digitized and blurred, giving it that smoky feel.
Yeah, very much different.
And
then he's just kind of, he comes out of the subway, and there's this grackle flint watching him.
Yep, just like they said, and and God, I need a cherry Coke, right? So this is all, what am I supposed to tell my boss? I need a cherry Coke, and now they're saying, hey, everybody's being sent off to take care of what they need to take care of. I'm going to begin arrangements on how to deal with him immediately. Meanwhile, you two hit the streets. We've got to up our efforts on locating the Fisher King. And
the first mention of that, right?
First mention of the Fisher King, and now we get it brought forward, tying into that whole, mythical treasure trove. And
how you were talking about the, this side of the chessboard, and they're really using the chessboard to show like how things are going, and he hands him the king, and he snaps it.
Right, and I mean, and here we've even got them. I think this chessboard showed up in the previous issue as well, and so they're sitting there playing. We've got that dark versus, dark versus light battle going on, and talking about that the Fisher King can change shape, but no matter what form he takes, the king will always be lame. And there's some interesting, these 2 pages have some interesting differences in the color choices that were made here. Whether it's just the background, the coloring being used on the close-up on the Umbra sprite's face there. And the background, again, I think this was another one of those cases where you've got this kind of almost herringbone pattern in the background on the red in the original, and it's been made into a smoother color, darker color in the reprint. And I think the colors have been changed to kind of help the story focus. The attention focuses more in on that, helps the Fisher King figure, that the Fisher King stand-in, the king chess figure pop.
Right. He breaks off a leg.
Yep. And Kevin makes his way. So there's another interesting decision here with this top panel where Kevin's in the background on the phone calling into work while a waitress is putting food down on the table. And in the original, she's in this blue uniform. Kevin is really in the backdrop, muted in the dark. You get a lot of depth here, but all the attention, all the dialogue is happening in the background. All of the visual focus is in the foreground on this waitress. And I think that was alleviated a little bit color-wise in the reprint, where the waitress's outfit is kind of this reddish brown, kind of matching the wall on the other side. And, we're focusing the attention now more on Kevin in the background. He's more lit. And anyways, I just thought that was an interesting choice there.
Yeah, I think cinematographically, if you were to think about this like in a film, it might have like focus on her setting it down and the cherry Coke, and then you would like rack focus to Kevin, whereas the food would be out of focus, and then Kevin would be in focus right when he started talking. So that's a very cinematic panel there, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting way of looking at the impact that color can have on where you draw your focus inside that panel. And then this next one here, another one of those open panels that that gets closed off by the addition of the background color of Kevin sitting down.
Yeah, I'm not sure anything is added by that, but an interesting choice nonetheless. Maybe just for continuity's sake. But I think like with the shadow, you develop that open panel, and then in the next panel, when the major background change occurs from the red and white to the blue background, it's interesting.
Yeah, and I think there's something you're going to see on these next panels here where when Mirth first appears we've just got this flash of green. Kevin's about to take a sip of his Coke. Got this.
He doesn't even get any Coke. That's the real tragedy of this page.
Yeah, I think he's the true inspiration for Hudson Hawk and the whole cappuccino issue in that movie. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Guy goes through the entire movie trying to just get a cappuccino, and every time he gets a cappuccino, something happens before he can take a sip.
Oh, no, I haven't seen that.
Anyway, so we've got this purplish background, right? There's a lot of great color stuff going on in this page and the next. The purplish background behind Kevin, and that splash of green. And the choice in the reprint, again, the entire panel kind of reflects this green coming in. It's reflected off the glass. And then finally, Mirth sitting here looking smug, Kevin's, oh no reaction. And I can understand completely why they probably got rid of this striped, heavily patterned background from the first one and just replaced it. That's a busy
it's a bit distracting, whereas again, like you say, guiding the eye and the focus of your panel to the two main characters and not necessarily on this overdeveloped background.
Right. And the colors changing and the flesh tones and everything, we can see how, you really can focus in on the characters where they kind of do just blend into the entire panel in the original. But Kevin is obviously, not thrilled to be seeing Mirth, who makes this, we get this little witty comment about, hey, you're looking well this morning, Kevin, aside from your clothes, that is, or your wardrobe. And
I gotta say, man, the early matte work and these two side views, as far as my own art being inspired by matte, okay, here on this spread as well, like in panel 4 and even panel 3, these eyebrows that's all black, like the straight line or curvy line for the eyes and the eyebrow is such a elemental thing that Matt does, and something that I really copped early in my art life. And especially these mouths too, which are nothing in the front, the cheek lines with just like a little line. Man, nobody does that, but it's so effective on some of these like smug looks and on these like furrowed brows, you know. And I think that's something that I think maybe, you know, any artist does, and especially if you're drawing yourself in your panels. Matt must have had some like a mirror or something in front of him, you know, where he looks, you know, at his face, and you try to figure it out, just like how you know, Jim Carrey said he sat in front of a mirror for half his life making faces to try to figure out his impressions. You know, in order to draw himself like this in so many ways, you don't need like an action figure to figure out poses or you know, one of these humans. He can just look at his face and take photos or you know, have a mirror while you're drawing. So it's awesome. Would he have thought of that if he was drawing someone else? Probably, because you see it in some of those early comics of his. But
to your point, it amazes me. This is one of those things, and it carries through in his work to this day. The amount of line work that Matt Wagner does to carry attention, emotion, in a facial reaction is remarkably minimal. And yeah, I don't remember seeing anything like it beforehand, that you could convey so much with so little. Especially when these came out, you know, this was still, maybe we were just coming off the heyday or in the middle of the heyday of, you know, the Byrne Claremont X-Men. I'm going to keep referencing that because that was my, you know,
that's your cornerstone.
Yeah, that's my cornerstone. And, you know, that was, you know, yeah, I read a bunch of other stuff, but I was a Marvel kid and that was the era. But that artwork was very different from this, right? And so, again, just thinking about what Matt says at the very beginning of this, talking about choosing the tools that you're going to hunt your prey with and making a deliberate decision, he's really making some very definite decisions in a different direction from what was, you know, big, what I recall as being big at that time.
And the minimalisticness of how he chose to say a bow and arrow, you know, so that's super minimal, and that's what we're getting, minimal to do the maximal.
And so here we go. You know, Kevin does not want to have this discussion. He says, you know, I've got a few questions for you, you know, a few questions, Captain Guru, and we're going to find a place more private. And Instant Mirth pushes him off into an alley. He says, coming up, instant privacy. And Kevin's like saying, hey, wait, just, and the next thing we know, he finishes his sentence at the top of a skyscraper. Just a minute.
He's like, what?
Yeah, and he is not thrilled. I mean, we've just got this shot.
No.
And I think this is great to look at side by side as well here, how these go. In many ways, the biggest thing, there's a lot of coloring decisions being made here, right? And so that's fine. But Mirth's face is muddy and almost a little sinister in that pose that he's got there. I get he's just standing there. They've just done the teleportation. He's almost got that pose. He's almost got that Samantha from Bewitched pose kind of thing going on. The arms crossed. You can almost, or Genie rather, the arms crossed. You can almost imagine him having just done a head nod and blink. They're there at the top of a building. But his face is really muddy in the original, and you can see that they've really lightened it up. It's still sparse details there, but you can see him much more clearly.
Agreed. What about the previous page? Would you mind showing that up there a little bit? There's a lot of, okay. So the texture is still there in the alleyway in the second to last panel.
We lose that open frame again.
Much. Yeah, we did. Yeah.
But that's
not too much change on that one.
Yeah, I think that's another decision. I mean, there's just been a very big decision on how are we going to show magic happening around Mirth, and I think this is just a matter of taste. I really like the crunchy line art version from the original, but you know, the more gradient kind of using the colors for shape itself to define the light feature of the magic in the reprint, it's cool. I mean, I mean, I think that's it. Arguably, one might say it looks more realistic to how one might expect magical flashes of light to appear, right? Because there isn't going to be lines running through something. So it's a very cool but very different way of showing that magic happening than what we saw in the.
I still think they could have preserved that open panel and still done the newer thing, but it still looks good. And like, you know how Brendan calls them knockouts. There's some of those like white lines through the middle where they knocked out some of the original lines, maybe.
Yeah,
I dig it.
I got to revisit that too. I keep you know, like there's some math concepts or philosophy concepts that sometimes as soon as you get it, it starts to slip away. I've got to revisit the concept of knockouts, how that works.
Oh yeah,
that was another.
Well, it's basically kind of taking the like black lines and making them a color, or making them white, or making them like all blue or all green in order to kind of mess with the feel of it or the depth or something like that.
Cool.
Brennan's awesome at it.
Okay, so before we go through all of this here, I'm going to take a moment and we're going to do a bit of a sidebar. But, you know, Mirth, just wondering, you know, still not getting it, saying, hey, but what could be more private? And we get the reveal that Kevin cannot stand heights. He's got vertigo. Get me down now. So this here hits a lot. So let's think just about the reluctant hero, right? We have got, we don't just have a reluctant hero about somebody who just doesn't want to accept what's going on around them. And this is, hey, am I dreaming? Is this a dream? This is crazy. We've also got, a fear of heights. And I don't think it's a gigantic leap to go from fear of heights to fear of success. And so fear of heights to fear of success. So this fires off a few things. Ages ago, I remember reading a book. I think it was called, I've got some notes here I'm going to refer to. I think it was from 100 Years of Psychotherapy, and We're Still Not Well Yet. So great book. And there's a point that is raised. And mind you, these are two therapists talking, making this analogy here. But one of them raises a point about a bullfighter, Manolet. And I'm going to share something here. So this is Manolet. And Manolet, his contribution to bullfighting was being able to, and you can see how close the bull is to him in this picture on the left.
Yeah.
He was known for being able to stand insanely still while a bull passed very close by. And rather than giving passes separately, he was able to remain in one spot and link 4 or 5 consecutive passes together into a very compact series. Now, look, I'm not condoning bullfighting. You know, it's a brutal sport. It's an amazing sport in its own way. So, I mean, think what you will of bullfighting in and of itself. But here's this guy who, that by the age of 12, had already, made a name for himself. And the following year, when he was 13, he made his public debut in a school of bullfighting. Now, he died in 1947. He was gored in the upper right leg as he killed the 5th bull of the day. It's now believed that actually he died from a blood transfusion of the wrong type. But there's a story that Manolet, when he was 9 years old, was supposedly a very frightened little skinny boy who hung around his mother in the kitchen. And then later he becomes the greatest bullfighter of the age, a symbol, the very symbol of, at least for certain generations and culture, of pure machismo. And so psychology will say, so this is, coming from there, psychology will say, yes, he became a great bullfighter because he was such a puny little kid that he compensated by being a macho hero. And that would be Alderian psychology. Take your deficiency, your inferiority, and you convert it to superiority. But suppose you took it the other way. So first of all, one thing, right? Him hiding behind, right, this great figure, you wouldn't imagine this guy, this epitome of machismo and just danger, hiding behind his mother's skirt, right? So this one might argue, here's where this whole fear of success kind of analogy thing comes in for me. And they mentioned, suppose you take it the other way and you read a person's life backwards. Then you say, Manalet was the greatest bullfighter, and he knew that. Inside his psyche, he sensed at the age of 9 that his fate was to meet 1,000-pound black bulls with great horns. Of course he fucking well held on to his mother because he couldn't hold that capacity. At 9 years old, your fate is all there and you can't handle it. It's too big. It's not that he was inferior. He had a great destiny. And there's an additional line relation made about this kind of thing that, from day one, a tree is the same tree all the way through, right? A zebra is a zebra from the very first day. So I think when we take a look at, let me stop sharing here. When we take a look at Kevin's fear of heights, his fear of success, as at least as I see it, I just think it's interesting to think that this is in many ways a resistance there because there's a part of him that knows he is the hero. He's always the hero. He's just not ready to face it. A neat sideline.
He is literally going to great heights. He will literally, reach the top of what it is to be a hero. So to be here and to even have any fears like this is opposite of what we think of when we think of a hero. Like Superman's not afraid of heights, or Wolverine's not afraid of blood or something, so it's interesting.
Yeah, and also
it's a great way to develop a character.
And it lays in a great piece also when we think about the entire character's arc, because later on we're going to have a very different scene at the top of a skyscraper. So this lays in something very early on where we get a good contrast between, okay, here we see Kevin on top of a very tall building freaking out. Later on, we're going to see the same kind of dilemma confronting him. One thing that is kind of neat that I discovered here, I'm going to share though, when I was researching Manalet a little bit, was, let's see if I can, this will let me go forward here. So one of my favorite pieces of art is Salvador Dali's Hallucinogen Toreador.
I've seen this in person.
Yeah, it's huge, right?
Florida.
I mean, look at this here.
Yeah,
this is a
huge.
great example of the scale. I think it's roughly maybe 30 feet tall. I can't imagine what it must have been like coming up close, painting the detail, and then backing out, because as you know, having seen it, this is a portrait of a toreador, with all these things going on. If you take a look at it here, as a matter of fact, right here, you've got the shadow under the nose. You've got the mouth here. Right. You've got the hat here, the tie, the green tie. We've got the red cape over the shoulder, the rose, shoulder kind of coming off here. So this was actually Manalet was actually the toreador, was the inspiration for this. And actually down here, we've got the bull and the horns. I think here, we've kind of break it out here so you can see the head, the tie, the shirt, and the cape. So I just thought it was interesting that having loved this piece for ages, it's a magnificent piece, to find out that that Manalet was actually the inspiration for it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I will say, we used to live in St. Petersburg, Florida, and they have the US's only Dali museum there, and they have that piece there. And to see it in person, because we were on a tour and the tour guide was telling us about it. You look at it and you don't see that. But then as soon as they elucidate that and they tell you that boob is actually a nose, and then it's the eyes, and it really starts coming out, and then you're able to get close and see the bull and see the face there of the bull that's really there. And they're talking about the atoms too, the feet, there's so much that they bring out to show you. It's really amazing. What an amazing piece.
It's like looking at a stereogram and finally having the 3D image pop out in front of you. I mean, it's just,
yes.
Life is full of these amazing moments where you get changes of perspective, and
Mhm.
something that you're looking at. And I think probably the first time you look at it, the first thing that probably strikes you is these shadowy figures of the Venus de Milo, moving forward.
Right.
Those become very easy to focus on, and all these disparate elements. It's anybody, if you're ever down in Florida around St. Petersburg, and they've got a brand new one there now, brand new museum. I saw it in the old one. I've seen pictures of the new one.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's probably where I saw it, with like the bean, the big glass, like flowing bean looking thing, and there's like an outdoor garden. It's beautiful.
No, it was a tiny, it wasn't much to speak of. When I went there, it was a small, as I recall, one-story building that was just okay, so cool. So let's pick back up here. Sidebar. We pick back up here, and Mirth goes, okay, better. And there's also some interesting these are small changes that happen here. We kind of, again, I think the jogger, right? In the reprint, the jogger, who's we got somebody in the foreground, very colorful, very in focus. Again, kind of muted out, allows us to focus back in on the action between Kevin and Mirth.
That's a nice change.
Yeah. And we see some similar things here, and probably just because details were probably lost, where these figures here in the background of this great Wagner silhouette shot kind of just become colored in. This person laying on the ground here, this is somebody laying on a blanket, disappears completely in the
Right.
But what I thought was interesting, we were talking about colors, is this purple and red kind of colors continue here, between the two of them. And actually we see it here. We had already seen it on the previous one. In the original, we've got purple. It kind of blends here, where it's meeting this angry red coming off of Kevin, and with the purple backdrop behind Mirth. And again, this entire background space behind Kevin, changing to that red to kind of denote his anger and rage in the moment. At least that's how I read it. But these colors continue here, where you can see, again, we've got that red of rage and kind of this purpley color here, behind Kevin, and the purpley color behind Mirth in the original. And that all kind of just gives way to a, to this kind of muted background, this muted green background in the reprint.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably, again, that's maybe another one of these things where you're a young artist and you really want to make and do it like how we said in the beginning. You're trying to use everything at your facility to make it different and new and guide the reader and make it something fresh and fun. But it's like, we don't necessarily need that, because there's already the facial features, there's already the actual words. You can clearly tell it's two different people talking. So then the colors is like a fourth thing that's kind of like getting the same feel across. Now, would I have gone with that muted green? I might not have, but Jeremy Cox, I respect your work. I feel like I'm constantly dogging you for your recoloring, but it's like, you're gonna hate the engineer that remastered your favorite album because it doesn't sound the same, but it sounds better, but it's still like you like the original.
Yeah, I think, the reprints, I think as we go through this, we're going to be constant. It's the risk of comparing things, right?
It's you gotta pro and con it out.
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong, and I think there's some great decisions made in the reprints as well. I don't know though. I'll tell you what, I like the vibrance and the dynamic choices made in the original. As you can see, you've still got the different colors behind Mirth and Kevin throughout the middle of this page here as we trade off in their dialogue, even to the point where you can see the color behind Kevin literally cool as he changes state.
Right.
It's red behind him as he's yelling, why the hell didn't you tell me there were 3 of those things? So let's get back to the grackle flint. So now they're down on the ground. Kevin is yelling at Mirth because he's already had a run-in with 1 grackle flint. Now he just had a run-in with 3, and it's kind of comedic as well. Now, why the hell didn't you tell me there were 3 of those things? And Mirth says, but there aren't. What do you mean there aren't? There are 5. And Kevin just cools off immediately, and the color follows him. The look on his face follows, and he's just like, oh boy.
Yeah, that is a great storytelling technique there. That is unfortunately not continued through. Agreed.
Yeah.
Even if they lightened the green up a little bit to kind of show that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, again, it's not necessary. It's certainly not necessary because everything else in the panels with the faces and all that is carrying it. Okay, so let's how about we move on to the next page here. Let's zoom through here a bit. Although I'll say, so why don't you take this part here? We get our first sight of just a much loved character here.
Yes, we do. We kind of go from a ground view up here. We see this red car. We see this lady, an Edsel. It looks like what could be a Grackle Flint coming out of the door, and we see just a great car. And I think when speaking with Matt, he just he loved this car. He loved the Edsel, right?
Yeah, and I think I recently finished Devil's Odyssey, and I had to, after I took a quick look at so no spoilers here, but after I took a quick look at the shuttle ship, I think it was used in issue 1 or issue 2 of Devil's Odyssey, the first thing I had to do because of some choices on the shuttle was to pull up pictures and look up, not look here in the comic, but look up photos of Edsels, because I think that whether it's the Edsel specifically, whether it was a small Easter egg kind of stylistic call out, to Edsel, or it was just that muscle car kind of look, it's definitely there with some of the fins and the styling of that shuttle coming down. But
it's just a good looking car.
Yeah, it's a beautiful car. And
so it kind of introduces this B plot and starts to really ramp up the flow of the issue, because we're kind of bouncing back and forth between two rising actions, like one rising like action, and then two a rising like realization of information that's happening between Kevin and Mirth.
Right, because we have this scene happening here, no words, no framing, as goes through the entire thing, no narrative, no captions to frame us in what's happening here. Meanwhile, Kevin is getting we enter exposition land here, on the right hand side of this panel here. Mirth, Mirth telling him, go on, ask. Kevin asking, why me? And Mirth saying, because there has awakened in you a power that will make you discover the hero you are destined to be. And Kevin starts to ask a question, right? And Kevin starts literally right there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And Kevin says, but why? And he gets interrupted, and he, gets this splinter in his hand. And I think I'm going to try and bring this up really close here. How do you like my really janky zoom?
That's nice.
So what I've always again, coming back, having read these after reading the end of the series, what always struck me about this is, I'm sorry, that's foreshadowing the bat. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that splinter and the way it pushes into the palm of his hand and indents a little bit looks like a tiny little bat to me.
Yes, it does. Absolutely does. And I was thinking, because like something he could do later, just like charge that little splinter and then be like, like that would be cool.
Yeah,
like it would have almost been a little cool if it had a little like green spark come off it for a second.
Yeah, although he might have at this point been, leading it up. It's amazing.
Still gestating.
You're getting into book 3 territory by the time you're
for sure.
A little bit of the end of book, I guess, in a little bit of the end of the other books. So, and here we continue this story. We've just got this young woman following. Now we know that it is clearly a Grackle Flint that she's following, and he goes into this alleyway, and just pure visual storytelling. What's going on here? This storyline is building as Kevin asks, hey, so explain this. How do I get hit by a subway train this morning without a scratch, and this afternoon I get a splinter? And without going into the actual dialogue of it, Kevin understanding that the power decides when it's going to arise. He can't call this power. It only arises when it's being used for the struggle. All news.
And again, yeah, he he really doesn't take full control of the power until the third book. Like it is always kind of like he's at the mercy of it. He wants it, but he doesn't really get a full grasp of it. And I think it doesn't come. It comes partly through learning his power, but also partly becoming to a certain point in age and in growth where he can actually call on it fully.
What do you think of this as an analogy for the artist's journey?
Oh, I think that's great as well. You know, like because writer's block. Like my last, I do these bi-monthly comics for Next Panel Press. You can find us at Next Panel Press on Instagram. But I didn't mean to have a post there. But like my last comic, I really started to write, and I felt like an impotent creator at this point. I was like, I can't think of anything. Like I have this idea of where the next one should go, but like my hand won't do anything. And then the deadline was looming. And I eventually just made a comic about writer's block. And I was like, I have to turn my inaptitude and inadequacies into the topic, I think this is perfect. It's like you can't always call on it immediately,
Yeah, and in that case, you turned your lemons into lemonade, as as he mentions the Reader's Digest here, to use that kind of a phrase for it.
Uh-huh.
I love these panels here, though. Actually, also just the way this page is broken up. You've got the open frame here, and then you've got this window pane of 4 little panels, and Mirth being split across 2. It looks cool. It's why do something like this, right? I mean, because typically, as a standard, just okay, I'm just reading comics here. I'd expect that to be 1 panel. It looks great this way, but what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on this decision here?
I think it's an aesthetic choice to have the 4 panels there. You want the 4 panels to have that flow of your comic, because while the bottom is still 2 images, I still believe it's 4 like actions. Like you see him there talking, you see it goes back to Kev, and then you see kind of Mirth's face, and then your next move is from his face, into his hand and the words. So like if we're talking, your eyes would still make like 4 moves there. So I think it's still to kind of delineate like kind of the way that you would move in a normal conversation, kind of. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's just really, I love little details like that sometimes visually. They just, and then without, I can't wait to get to the second page on this here, but we just continue to follow this young lady. Edsel, let's just call her who she is. We continue to follow Edsel as she follows into this alleyway, but this is really Matt taking these silhouettes of his to another level, and this is one of those things that really gets lost. And what is that? Is that Zipatone?
Oh, yeah.
That's one of those things that really gets lost in the reprint, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's so crazy because they're like different gauges. I believe it's called, for like the different character. So like Mirth's is a wider gauge, Kevin is a smaller gauge. And actually they both are, they go from smaller to bigger to smaller. What's that called? It's escaping me right now, but man, it's just so of a time, so 80s. We've talked to Matt before about these different duotone papers that he was using, and you cut them out to these forms and you actually stick them directly to the page. Oh man, it's so crazy.
It just gives it this neat dimensionality, with Mirth's leg wrappings, Kevin's bolt. On the screen, I'm sure it's not nearly doing it justice for kind of how those patterns work out. It gets a little grainy and hard to see.
The only thing that's better in the new stuff is like how Kevin's eyes pop. You kind of lose that with the Zipatone duotone.
Mm-hmm.
But it's fine. I love the the dot patterns. They're so cool. They're so 80s. They're so of this amazing time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a neat thing. I mean, look, the silhouettes, the pure silhouettes work great. Like you said, Kevin's eye, I think, pops better. I mean, you can't even really, at least at this distance here, it's hard to see it even in that fourth panel.
It's hard to see it.
And then, we get back into some exposition here with Mirth laying it all out. Who the heck are these bad guys, right? There's the Umbra Sprite. These Grackle Flints aren't the threat. They're lieutenants controlled by a greater evil, a vast darkness, the Umbra Sprite. The Grackle Flints are brothers, and he's their father. He's far, and then, we get this name check, right? He's Attila, Herod, Nero, Hitler, and Stalin realized in one. His plottings are subtle or direct as need be, but they're always insidious. He strives even now to destroy what is light and good in us. So we're in the second issue here. We need to continue setting the board. Who the heck is everybody? What are they about?
Yeah.
And this Etzel's continues to turn and ends up in a dead-end alleyway, and this Grackle Flint comes out with a cinder block while the guys continue to talk. And Kevin is educated that the old guy in the alley who was being mugged and killed, why was he killed? Because there are certain people who are naturally drawn into the eternal struggle. Others have the rare talent to recognize Kevin for who he is. They see the hero within him, and that old gentleman was one of these people. He was killed simply because someday he may have encountered you, known you, and tried to help. And you can see,
it's crazy.
Yeah, that Kevin doesn't take that nicely, doesn't seem to like that news. It's a heavy bit of information to have.
Yeah, it really is. And then that just gets you thinking, like, in another time frame, could he have saved him? And then would that have helped him on his journey? Like, what information and what had that guy known to help Kevin that is now completely lost? And like, what,
Well, to Ben's point, I mean, the guy knew what a Grackle Flint was, which is rare and unique in and of itself when you consider that the only other person we meet who already knows is Mirth.
True.
So narrative convenience. I mean, sometimes you just have to chalk things up to narrative convenience. We needed to get it on out there.
But we don't know.
Does raise an interesting question. So let's keep on moving here.
So we're back in on this Etzel flow. He throws it under her. He lifts the car up, and so she gasses it, but those back tires aren't on the ground anymore. He's like, he's got her.
And we've gone through, what is this? This is 4 or 5 pages now of just sheer visual storytelling about this. We still have no idea what's going on, other than for some reason, she's chosen to follow him. And he clearly noticed it and has now decided, rather than just to get away, rather than just to go, bye, I'm bailing, it has chosen to do this to her, to put her into a situation where now she is trapped in this alleyway. And Kevin and Mirth continue with saying up, and now we start getting into that resistance, right? The resistance to everything. Mirth saying, hey, I must say, Kevin, you're taking this all very well. Who says I'm taking any of it? You don't believe it? I didn't say that either. Then why play along? Until I see a little more, let's not call me a player, merely an active spectator. He kind of wants his cake and eat it too, right? I mean, he can't deny it. You've got to figure, and actually we'll get this into this for a second, and something that is set on the next page here. But so now Mirth flashes some more magic and asks Kevin to try to tell him something. And it is also neat because doing these two parallel, it's this almost works better in comics. You can see this being done in comics and in like TV or movies, right? Where you have, usually it's done with action, where you will have quick cuts between one action scene and another action scene, whether they're parallel activities, whether they're meant to be, mirroring each other, or whether they're just meant to be showing things happening simultaneously like these do. The nice thing about
the rising action.
Right. And in here in the comic, you can get away with having not any dialogue and a lot of dialogue. Whereas if you did this in a movie going back and forth, this here would really slow this down.
Yeah.
It feels, all this dialogue would really break your momentum on this. But in a comic, you can get away with it.
So in my reading, I still kind of like speed up this talk. I still try to like for me reading this, I start getting into it. And I'm like, I really feel the rising action continuing. It's like there's something you must tell me. Here we go, and then it's like blam.
And we're rising to something on both sides here, right? Because here comes Edsel out. She's working and grabbing that bat out from underneath, and they're getting ready to show down.
Yeah, they are. So they're showing off right now. And she's holding that bat like, I mean, yes, it looks like a baseball stance, but it also looks like she's wielding a sword or wielding, some sort of something other than a baseball bat.
Yeah, she's getting ready to crack somebody upside the head one way or another. It's a weapon. I mean, it is not it might be reminiscent of a batter's stance, but she's getting ready to take some action here. But now Mirth, and this is neat to see the two different, styles of magic being portrayed here. Again, I think there's some points, for what Jeremy Cox did with, just bringing that magic to life. And again, they're just two different ways to do it. I love the crunchy.
And he kept the open panel finally.
Yeah. But, so Mirth floats up in the air. Kevin says, hey, get down here before someone else sees you. And he's told, no one can see me unless I want them to. Adding back in to this whole level of, at some level, Kevin would be completely within his rights to think, oh, great. Now I'm being told that nobody else can see. These are all.
Right. I feel like I'm talking to myself over here.
Right. Well, yeah. And am I going crazy? Am I going around the bend? Accept it. Yeah. I don't even know if any of this is real. Maybe this is all just happening inside my head. And then Mirth asks him, so tell me, why is someone with all the power you contain scared of heights? I'm sorry, but I find it all quite silly too.
Really calling him out
and wondering, why would you be afraid of heights? And there's a great visual storytelling here about answering that as we get Edsel making. Yeah, and this is not just a swing. She's like doing some just great moves. He comes lunging, she dodges out of his way, does some fancy work with the bat, and comes down with this slam on his head. It's just beautiful action here. So
and then she, it knocks his hat off, and he looks at her, and I think she looks surprised to see that this is a gray bald man, and she's like, wait a second. Yeah, look at that, dude. That's awesome. That is an improvement right there. Matt's action and the way he does this white like movement is so good, but dang, Jeremy Cox did a great job. And I think that's just a testament to like some computer fades and stuff like that, but that looks amazing.
Yeah, well, and we go from this kind of everything in shadows, especially on that first panel, everything comes out of the shadows, and we can really see Edsel, right? She's not just in this purplish kind of color. Like you said, that whole action scene there where, we get this forward motion. We get how opaque she is helping, bring forward the action in time. Yeah, very cool.
So well done. I mean, it's just a testament to how well it was established originally by Matt, that they could develop it so well like that.
Yeah, and so anybody listening to the podcast here, I'm gonna say, especially the way we're going through these here, a lot of this, and I get this. Sometimes I listen to podcasts that are also vodcasts that go heavily into talking about visuals. Do yourself a favor, take a swing on over to YouTube and just bebop around if you have to. Just you don't have to listen to everything all over again, but just you gotta
check this page out.
Yeah, scrub forward and take a look at some of these side by sides. And then as this is all going on, as Mirth is asking Kevin, why are you afraid of heights? We get him roiling over in pain in midair,
feels it,
and then just dropping to the ground with a thud.
Yeah, and again, I got to give it to Jeremy on this one. This looks really good. This looks really really cool
And
with
mhm.
the spheres and stuff.
Yeah, the spheres, the thud, just the kind of the motion even. We get some of that dimensionality right here, even in the even in
Oh
the cape,
yeah,
in the drapes there, instead of the marker work on the right-hand side. But also I like how this here, without anything being said, this is, why are you scared of heights? Why is anybody scared of heights? They could fall.
right. He does it immediately, and he's like, "Mirth, I freaking told you so." No,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
interesting too. It's such a cool thing too, because how Mirth can feel these disturbances. It just elevates and deepens his character and his empathy. You see that he's such an empathetic character,
And I love the
he
interplay
feels it.
of purple and green in the
Yeah,
original two, because we know that purple becomes a very important color, especially in the second book in Hero Defined.
yeah,
So now we continue with the showdown. The Grackle Flint closing in on, grabbing Edsel by the throat, taking the bat. She swings one more time, even though he's got this hand like a vice around her throat. She
yeah.
takes a swing, he grabs it and throws the bat away.
Mm-hmm.
And
Ooh.
yeah, what you want to point something
Just,
out?
it's foreshadowing, because that bat obviously is going to become so important. But then we flash back. Oh, you got, yeah. That's really well done. He's like, "What's up, dude? What happens?" He's like, "I can feel it." What does he call it? But now the pain clears and I begin to see the sight. He's getting the shining.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And he starts to, and so we get, it happens again. One of those, so we're getting a payoff, right? We've already been told there are people out there who could connect with you and that the enemy is going to destroy because they might recognize you or help you in some way. It
At some
happens again.
point.
Yeah. One of those I spoke to you of, those who will know you and join you is again at the mercy of a Grackle Flint. And I think these are, um, it's interesting to see the motion blur decisions here
Yeah.
with the reprint. Again, I think it's all fine. Matt working with the tools that he had at the time. We have a lot of those. What are those called again? They're attention lines. What are those called when you're doing all those lines to pull action in?
I mean, I feel like in anime they call them like speed lines or motion lines. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like again, we knew Matt was influenced by anime back in his early work, so it must be that.
Yeah, and I mean, and even in old, like even 1940s and earlier advertising, I mean, you would do those things around somebody to show shock,
Yeah, true.
amazement.
I
Do
don't. I
them
guess I don't
around.
know the actual term. Yeah.
So
But this is like, as far as art is concerned, the poses that these two characters have in this final panel. I mean, it's tough for both of them. Mirth is kind of like this, and the hand is like this, which is like such a weird thing to draw. And Mirth's up like this. He's like, and
mhm.
Kev's kind of like, So this is a tough panel. These are hard motions and actions and angles to catch on these characters for sure.
I think this is a panel. I mean, I think this is one of those panels where I just think Matt's growth as an artist is still evident. I mean, it's raw, but you take a look at like the definition and what's happening with Kevin's face here, and then Kevin's face here.
Yeah.
I think we'd see this looking very differently done even a year later. Even a year later being done by Matt, this would come
Definitely.
across very differently. And then finally, we end to be continued with that Grackle Flint spur coming on down as Edsel is trying to hold him off, being pushed down against the hood of the Edsel.
Wow. And hey, the merchandising machine begins here.
Yeah, Kamiko
What's hanging? Mm-hmm.
A few people who proudly post pictures of those hanging mobiles sometimes with the Mage on one side and Evangeline on the other.
I don't have one, man. I want one.
Kamiko. I remember seeing, I think, one of those up at my local comic store back in the day when I was probably even before I started reading Mage again, because I picked up on it later in the series. Out of the independent, just initially, it just didn't catch my attention, didn't trip my trigger. Boy, was that to change. And then another thing here,
good
we've
point.
got God's Law is Her Law. Call out there for Chuck Dixon's, Charles Dixon's Evangeline.
I have not read that.
Cool,
So
man.
I probably have some issues. All
Okay,
right, nice. What an ish.
Dude, yeah. Amazing.
Wow.
2 issues in, 13 jam-packed adventuresome episodes to go. There's some great fun to be had. I hope you can join me in the future for another episode.
Be happy to.
Yeah. Everybody, thanks. Hope you've enjoyed this walkthrough. We've gone much deeper than I think I ever thought we'd be getting on into these when I first started this up. But just remember, we're out there. You'll find these in the show notes. Out there on Instagram, out there, we've got a Facebook group. That's not, it doesn't seem to be quite the thriving environment for this kind of cast. I think I got a stronger following on Instagram. It's just, a more visual environment. But whether you find us on Instagram, whether you find us on Facebook or YouTube or the podcast, I'll be sure to make sure we've got all the URLs in the notes for you to get to, because Lord knows, I don't remember them off the top of my head at this moment.
There's too many.
All right. Join us next time when we'll be looking at issue 3. Until then, everybody, magic is green. Stay excellent. Eli, anything you want to close out with?
Just enjoying it. Have an amazing day.
Have an amazing day. That's awesome. Take it easy, everybody. Stay excellent.
All righty.
Bye.